It's my pleasure to welcome Eric Woolworth to Questions for Cancer Research today. Eric is in his 30th year with the NBA's Miami Heat and his 25th as president of business operations. In his role, Eric oversees all non-basketball operations of the organization. Eric, great to see you.
Nice to see you too, Chris.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. There's a lot of amazing things unfolding in the world of sports currently, especially in the NBA. We look forward to gaining some clarity and insight from you today. Let's begin with your longtime colleague, NBA legend, Pat Riley.
Yeah.
Pat began his tenure with the Miami Heat in 1995 as team president and coach. Overall, Pat has won 9 NBA championships as either a player, coach, or team executive, 3 of which came with the Heat. I recently came across an amazing statistic. From the start of his playing career through the 2023 season, Pat had participated in 25% of all NBA championship finals, which is absolutely amazing.
Yep.
Just this week, the Heat dedicated their home court in his name and honor. Eric, what's it been like working directly with this NBA legend over the last 30 years?
Well, listen, I think you just made the statistical case. Pat's one of the seminal, actors in the history of the NBA, and so working with him for 30 years has been, one of the true honors and privileges of my life. It's interesting. Mickey Harrison bought the team in January of '95, I think, and I was actually the first person he hired as general counsel back then. 30-year-old lawyer having absolutely no idea what I was doing, and I had been on the job for, I don't know, 3 weeks, maybe a month, trying to figure out what the job was, what the rules and regulations were, like how the league worked. And he called me over to his office, which is out at Carnival by the airport in Doral. I go over there and he said, "Eric, I got 2 things I need you to work on. One, we need a new arena." And that actually was successful because I'm sitting here in the arena we built 25 years ago. And the other thing is, I think the Knicks are about to file tampering charges against me because they think I've been talking to Pat Riley. And I'm thinking to myself, what the hell is tampering? Like, I'm brand new to this. So
Yeah.
I spent my first summer on the job as a still pretty green young lawyer, trying to get Pat out of New York. And ultimately there was David Stern in those days, served as judge, jury, and executioner in these matters. And so we spent the summer, sort of in a quasi-legal battle, I guess you would say, submitting briefs and evidence and all this stuff. And there was a hearing in August in the league offices in New York. And I will never forget it. It was David and Mickey and I and our outside attorney, Dave Checketts, who was running the Knicks back then, and his lawyers. And David put on a show, like just killed us, just was ragging on us, like giving us a really hard time about all the rules we broke and this and that. And he's going to throw the book at us. And he fined us $1 million and took a first-round draft pick. And I thought I was going to get fired. Like, I thought I had done an absolutely terrible job. We had lost. It was, humiliating. Mickey felt bad. And what I came to realize later in life, as my relationship with David Stern, evolved and matured, was David knew exactly what he was doing. He was trying to make the Knicks feel like they had won when he knew, in fact, we had won because we were getting Pat Riley. Pat started a couple of weeks later as a team president and our coach, and he and I have been working together ever since. It was quite an initiation into the ways of the NBA, to say the least.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. I mean, I didn't know that story at all, and I knew that your guys' timing kind of overlapped there. But I mean,
yeah, I started 5 months before he did.
5 months. I mean, for Mickey to come in and say, "Hey, I'm going to bring Pat Riley in here and get this thing going." I mean, that's the decision of a lifetime, and it's awesome that you played such a big role in all that.
Yeah, well, like I said, at the time I felt awful, and now it was like, oh yeah, but we nailed that.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, you walked away with the fine. Hey, listen, as we've come to learn in the NBA, $1 million fine is really at the end of the day not that much money. I mean, the numbers
Well,
have gotten
you,
so
you got to
big.
remember, that was 1995. It sure seemed
95,
like a
yeah.
lot of money. So
Especially for a first year general counsel, I'm sure it seemed
exactly,
like an awful lot of money. Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Eric, under your guidance, the Heat has consistently been a recognized league leader in terms of marketing, fan entertainment, and customer service. A great credit to you. Coach Riley has also done an amazing job overseeing the basketball side of the operations. To what extent does the business operations side of the organization interact with the basketball operations side throughout the course of the year?
That's an interesting question. I would call it a symbiotic relationship, right? Like, Pat roots for me to do well, and I root for Pat to do well. The better our basketball team does, the easier my job gets. The better we do, the more money he has to spend on players. But our goals are slightly different, right? I mean, his goal every year is to win a championship, and ours is to be successful financially. So there is like it's aligned, I would say, but it's slightly different goals. Obviously, we celebrate each other's victories, and we try to help each other when we're down. Um, it's if you're asking about Pat, it's interesting. Pat's 20 years older than I am, and we both reported to ownership for the last 25 years. Um, and I think there's a lot of I think maybe it took me a while, but there's a lot of mutual respect there, and I think we've worked our operations have worked really, really well together to try to make nothing but good things happen for the organization. And I think you look back to that date in '95 when he started, and I haven't looked at the stats in a couple of years, but I think we're the most successful franchise in terms of wins, playoff appearances, finals appearances during that time, and the business has kept pace more or less with the basketball operations, and we've been we built a good business, and I think are really well respected around the league in terms of being innovative, being um, uh, customer first, fan facing organization that really takes care of its fans.
Yeah, I mean, the record really for somewhat of a relatively still new franchise is just amazing. You guys must come together, preseason or over the summer, kind of with an idea of, look, this is how much we're going to spend, and a little bit later, maybe we can talk a little bit about the luxury tax, and probably have a number that everybody feels comfortable with. But I'm sure at some point you get into a season, and right, I mean, what Tyson said that a great game plan is good till you get punched in the face, right? I mean, what happens when
Yeah,
all of a sudden you get in the season, you've got injuries, you've got underperformance, you're like, uh-oh, this is not looking so good. We may have to go out and get a player or two, which not as only is going to be a higher salary, but now we've got a lot of luxury tax implications. How does that work?
yeah. I wish it was that scientific, Chris. It's and this is, I think, a major tribute to our ownership, to Mickey and to Nick Harrison, and that is that, listen, things change all the time in this business. We could have a great plan on July 1st, and it's all out the window by by Christmas.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of the business, and you have to be agile and flexible and adaptable, and willing to change up on the fly. And we've done that, I think, as well as anybody has over time.
Yeah, yeah. Eric, let's talk a little bit about the league expansion. There are currently 30 NBA teams. The Celtics are up for sale, and it's expected that two new franchises will be awarded in the next year or two. Media sources indicate that the likely locations are Las Vegas and Seattle. Nothing set there. There are reports that the league would like to see a Celtic sale price of $6 billion, and is hoping the new franchises will sell for somewhere between $4 to $5 billion each. The proceeds from the new franchises will be evenly split by the existing 30 team owners, a very lucrative payoff for the owners, which will ultimately be offset by future revenue splits with the new teams further down the road. As the executive representing the financial and business operations of the Heat, what's your take on league expansion?
So it's a complicated question, and I think that while those media reports are certainly out there, I think our commissioner Adam Silver has been quoted several times as saying, nothing has been decided and nothing set in stone. And I think there's a lot of conversations happening, but there's a reason those decisions haven't been made, and that is that every time you bring a new team into the league, clearly there's a cash infusion for all the owners, as you just mentioned, but there's two more teams to share all the revenue with. And a lot of owners aren't really interested in doing that. They like the 30-team league. So I don't think there's any consensus right now around expansion again. And I think Adam is spending some time, and his staff is spending a lot of time really looking at what those sales prices might be, how the owners, the different ways the owners could or should be looking at what expansion might mean. And I think when all that information is compiled, there will be some difficult discussions at the board of governors level. But those things haven't really started yet. You mentioned a fairly short timetable. I wouldn't think it's happening that quickly if it happens at all.
Right. So despite what we're seeing and hearing, by absolutely no means is this a layup that there will be teams added to the NBA in the near future.
I think that's right.
Okay.
And I'm not saying it's not going to happen. It may very well happen, but there's a lot of work to be done between now and then.
Yeah, I get you. Okay. Forbes recently came out with their 2024 valuations of current NBA teams. The Warriors garnered the highest valuation at $8.8 billion. The average team value was $4.4 billion. They valued the Heat at $4.25 billion. The average valuation multiple is 11.7 times revenues, which is, I'm sure, an all-time high, but it's probably a little misleading as it reflects the future payout of the anticipated expansion franchise fees. We've just cast them down on that, and certainly the new TV contracts, which will start next year. Which, speaking of which, next season the league begins a new $76 billion 11-year TV package, which will about triple the annual television revenue payout to team owners. Eric, a lot of good things happening in the NBA right now. What are your thoughts about valuation, the outlook going forward? What are the major growth opportunities for the league?
So those are a lot of questions.
Start with valuation.
On the valuation. So I hate to sound like somebody who's always skeptical of the media, but all due respect to Forbes, those annual valuations are nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, these are not public companies, right? I don't know where
nobody talks to them. None of this information is public. They just every year it just goes up a little bit because they write the same column every year.
Yeah.
Listen, and this is not just true of the NBA. This is true of all the sports leagues. When a team comes up for sale, it's worth what the next, very wealthy individual is willing to pay. And sports teams historically don't get valued the way a normal business does. The valuations that we've seen pretty much since, forever, don't really make a lot of sense in terms of annual revenue, operating profits, or any of those kinds of traditional metrics that people would look at for the valuations of business. It's scarcity. There's only so many of these things, and if you're wealthy enough and you want to have one, then you're gonna pay whatever to get it. And I think that is really the story of sport team valuations over time. It's not necessarily about revenues or market or anything else. It's about, how do I get one? Because they're so hard to get and they come up for sale so infrequently.
Yeah, these are without a doubt, these are trophy assets.
Right.
It seems like, if you're no shortage of billionaires out there who said, hey, I'd like to own one of these things. And I'm not saying for all, but we know for a certain percentage of those billionaires, they're not really focused as much on the bottom line as some others are, right? I mean, this is something like, hey, I've got the money. This is a lot of fun. I mean, this is something I'd like to do. Think, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, it's just interesting that, not always, but a lot of times new owners come into the league and they've obviously seen the books on what they're buying, but because they've been so successful in whatever business, their primary business is, they come in and, they all think they can do it better, and, they'll make it profitable and they'll make it more. And they all learn the hard lesson that it doesn't really work that way. For the most part, these teams are pretty well run, and there is no magic bullet for turning profits, especially if you want to win. You gotta make the investments that that may hurt your ability to turn an operating profit on an annual basis. The value will continue to rise, and you will ultimately be able to, if you are a seller, eventually you will ultimately be able to recapture your investment, but it's probably not happening on an annual basis from an operating perspective.
Yeah, I get it. And I guess probably in terms of valuation, maybe in the next year we'll learn from the Celtics, right? I mean, there are reports that they're trying to push for a $6 billion valuation. They're going to have some serious issues coming up with luxury tax and second aprons, and it's not going to be the cleanest thing. But I guess we'll find out pretty soon if somebody's going to value the Celtics at $6 billion.
I think that's a fair analysis.
Yeah.
And my guess is somebody will, but we'll see.
Yeah, I get you.
The Celtics are a phenomenal organization. Like the people that run it are. There's a guy named Rich Gotham that's got my job up there. He's really good at what he does. He's a good friend, and I wish them well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the league is in such a good place right now. What are the big growth opportunities going forward for the NBA?
So I think, listen, obviously you always look at the media deals, which does provide some pretty phenomenal growth. I still think that there are a lot of really interesting international opportunities out there, other than soccer, and in some places, believe it or not, cricket. The NBA is the most popular sport on the planet, and there's in the old days, 25 years ago, it was hard to figure out how to try to take advantage of all that. But with the internet and social media and all these different ways now that we have to reach fans in those other countries, and our games are shown, all over the world, in different either streaming or on television, the fan base just continues to grow, and that opens up corporate opportunities, that opens up merchandise opportunities. And I think the league, which used to be very protective of all those rights, has loosened the strings a little bit, and the teams are allowed to do a little bit more now internationally. And I think that's going to continue to evolve. And as it evolves, opportunities definitely emerge. So I think the international opportunities are real. And listen, in our local markets, not every team is selling out all their games. Not every team is maximizing their opportunities, and as teams become better and better run, that will continue to happen as well. Sometimes, the best opportunities are sitting in your backyard. So there's the growth, I think is still very strong across the league, and the league's in a good place, as you said. So I think people are paying attention, and it's all good.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what's really come into light, maybe since the pandemic, is just the value of live sports, right? Just incredible. I mean, it's the demand out there, and you don't know. I mean, you look at the TV contract that was just signed. At some point, does this all settle down? But I mean, there is no shortage of demand for live sports out there right now.
No, that's right. But counteracting that a little bit is, unlike the NFL, which really has all of their media controlled at the league level, the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball have had a different model where the league itself controls some of the media, but each team has the ability to have local media deals. And the death of cable is coming quicker than anybody anticipated. And our regional sports network's been in bankruptcy now for almost 2 years. We're hoping that they're going to emerge sometime soon, but it's not at all a given that the local media environment is going to continue to be as strong as it's been, financially, at least. I think you're right. The demand for the content is clearly there. The delivery method may be changing and moving more towards a streaming model, and how we exploit that economically. That model hasn't been established yet. So there's it's been challenging and frustrating getting us here, but I think now you look ahead and you see a lot of opportunities and a lot of interesting things starting to happen that will play out in the next 3 to 5 years probably.
Yeah, yeah. Before we leave that topic, it's pretty funny. There was a great guy up here in Fort Lauderdale I got to know over the last few years. LD Gorman passed away last year at age 97. He looked about 20 years younger than that. And he was a huge Kentucky booster, very successful in the coal business, very big supporter of Kentucky's basketball program. I wouldn't be surprised if Pat Riley knew him, but LD was a character, and he told me a story. He said back in the late 70s, he was trying to buy a piece of property here on the ocean from Harry Mangurian, who owned the Celtics at that time. And I guess Harry said to me, he goes, look, he goes, I'll give you a good deal on this house. He goes, if you do me a favor. He says, I'm really not enjoying running the Celtics. I'm not having any fun. He said, I'll tell you what. He says, if you buy the Celtics from me for $12 million, I'll give you a good deal on this house. And unfortunately, LD, and it didn't hurt him at all financially, passed on that deal. But pretty amazing that, late 70s, not all that long ago, $12 million. And here we are today talking $6 billion. Pretty incredible.
Yeah. No, the expansion, I think well, I don't remember, but it was, no, listen, just in the time that I've been in the league, it's unbelievable what's happened. I mean, I think the salary cap was 14 million or 17 million my first year in the league.
That's amazing. That's incredible. I mean, listen, I've said in other interviews, and you would know the numbers better than me, but I guess the Wall Street Journal basically said, hey, in 7 to 8 years, we'll have NBA players making $100 million a year. I mean, that's really amazing.
Certainly heading in that direction.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk a little luxury tax. The NBA luxury tax was first introduced in 2001. Over the 24-year history of the tax, the Heat is basically in the middle of the pack in terms of total luxury tax payments made. However, during that period, the Heat have been to the finals 7 times with 3 world championships, which is really, really impressive. This year's luxury tax threshold is 171 million. I don't know if these numbers have changed recently, but the Heat were projected to be over the threshold this year by about 14 million, which would result in a $27 million luxury tax payment. Eric, can you discuss the Heat's overall approach and philosophy with regard to the luxury tax?
I can and I will, but first I just have to pause and laugh a little bit as you were describing that. We haven't talked about it yet, but we went to high school together, right? And you were the captain of the basketball team. And I was captain of the hockey team, and I have 3 NBA championship rings. Like, how did that happen, Chris? Anyway,
you did something right. I don't know how I messed that up so bad, man. I really and I'll tell you what. On top of all that, the guy who lived diagonally across from my dorm room was Trey Anastasio. With fish. So I mean. Yeah. I was surrounded by it, and but no, that is pretty funny, and
still can't dribble a basketball with my left hand. Anyway, so the luxury tax. Listen, anybody who works in the NBA who tells you that they want to be a taxpayer is lying to you. Nobody wants to pay a luxury tax, right? It's increasingly it's just super punitive. But there's sort of there's a couple of different, I think, operating philosophies across the league. There are certain teams that just never pay the luxury tax, like they just won't, and I respect that. It's harder to win, I think, if you have that mentality. But I understand that they just either because of market size or just philosophically, like I'm always gonna try to be under the luxury tax line. I understand. There are certain teams that don't seem to mind paying it at all, and are pretty consistently above the tax level, trying to win, and some of those teams have won a bit. And then there are teams like us that are sort of opportunistic, and when you see that the team is in a position with that one more piece to compete for a championship, you go for it. And I think it's a strategic strike kind of mentality, and that's always been the way we have approached it. And I think hugely successfully, given the 3 championships and the 7 finals appearances. And but listen, it's super punitive. Like financial, like as the business guy, I hate it. Like it's virtually impossible to run at a profitable situation when you're paying a tax. Because what the media doesn't tend to write about is it's actually a double whammy. One, you're paying the tax, whatever it is, and two, all the non-taxpayers split the money that the taxpayers are paying. So if you're a taxpayer, you're not only paying in, you're not receiving, and you get hit gumming and going, and it really adds up. And so that's but the way we've always approached it, and the way the Aircents have approached it is, listen, if that's what it takes to win at any given time, then we're going to go for it. If we can get out and still be competing for championships, then that's even better. And that's kind of the way we've always approached it.
It's definitely getting tough. I think go back maybe 2 months ago, Steph Curry came out with some comments that said, "Hey, the days of NBA dynasties are over with. It's getting way too hard with these new stringent laws on luxury tax and aprons to stockpile talent." And I interviewed Mike Breen, and I said, "Mike, what do you think about that?" And he said, "Chris," he said, "there's been NBA dynasties going all the way back." And he said it'll continue to be that way going forward. He said these guys, the GMs, these guys in their front offices are so smart, they'll find a way around that. And I was like, you look at some of this stuff. I mean, the league is trying so hard, right, to create parity. I don't know. It's gotten really tough. I mean, do you think we'll see any dynasties going forward? It definitely looks like it's gotten pretty hard.
It's always been hard, and yet there have been, right. So I would tend to agree with Mike Breen that I think it may become harder, but that doesn't mean it's not going to
happen. Yeah. And as you were saying, I mean, the Warriors are number one on the luxury tax list, having paid over 500 million, and they're expected to pay 200 million this season, which is incredible. But I guess for them, it's been worthwhile if we take forward saying, "Hey, they're the most valuable NBA team out there." I mean, that's pretty amazing. Those are some big numbers.
Listen, it's never comfortable talking about another team, and I don't like to do it, but they're a great example of a team that's not hesitated to pay the luxury tax over time, and yet for the first time, in recent memory at least, they made a decision this offseason not to re-sign one of their players for financial reasons, or it seems that way. And he's now in Dallas, and that's probably what Steph is talking about.
I mean, $200 million is really getting up there. I would think they've got to kind of pull back a little bit and get out of that repeat offender status, right? I mean, that's really onerous.
And that's one of the developments over time in the way the luxury tax works is the repeater tax makes it that much more punitive. But at some point you got to get out, so the clock restarts, or it just becomes totally untenable.
Yeah, I get you. Eric, I'm going to have a little fun on this next question, but I'm not sure it's a whole lot of fun for you. The Heat have a tremendous fan base. The organization currently ranks 5th on the all-time NBA consecutive sellout list, and the streak continues this season. That's really nice. It's amazing.
Very proud of that.
Yeah. Congratulations. And who would have ever guessed that a guy named Woolworth would know anything about sales, right?
That's right.
However, I want to thank you too for making my Christmas shopping so easy there when I was in grammar school. One stop there at Woolworths, couldn't beat that. Okay, however, the fan base has demonstrated a propensity for showing up somewhat late for the games. To me, it's most notable during the playoffs when you tune in, and it's so surprising to see empty seats on the lower sections. Typically, by the second quarter, most seats have filled in. I'm sure this is somewhat frustrating for executives, coaches, and the players. No doubt there have been some internal discussions over this. Eric, I guess the Miami fans just like being fashionably late. What's your take on all this?
That it's funny. So as you said, we've sold out every game going back to the end of the 09 season, and I think people in this town want to show. Listen, Miami's an event town, and people are you say fashionably late. Okay, that's one way to say it. Pe- people come when they want, but they're buying the tickets, and that's their right. Like, we've tried certain things over time to get people to come earlier, and I think, a little bit of, so some of it is true, and some of it is a little bit of a media over exaggeration. And a lot of the times when you see empty seats, people are actually in the clubs or doing what people always do in Miami, which is partying, because it's also a party town. And
Yeah.
and we have provided spaces and the kind of atmosphere that people like to come and do that. So it's a little bit of all those things. David Stern used to hate it because he thought it looked bad on TV when there were empty seats. And I'm like, David, they're in the club spending money. Isn't that what we all want? Like that's
Yeah.
the whole point.
Right.
So he and I would have a good debate and chuckle about that. But listen, the ticket business here has been fantastic for a long time. We love our fans. It's their prerogative. If they want to come a little late, it's fine. And so we don't sweat it a whole lot. We think it's kind of amusing that it's a media fodder on a regular basis, and yet the media in some of those places maybe should be looking closer to home at teams that haven't sold out as many games for as long as we have, and fan base hasn't been quite as loyal and supportive as ours has been. Our fan base is amongst the best in the world.
Yeah, no, that's just a tremendous record. You'll be sold out again for this year, so you guys keep inching your way up on that all-time sellout list, which is great. Eric, here's something that's getting a lot of attention these days. In 2020, the NBA opened the door to private equity investments. Under the current rules, a private equity fund can invest up to 20% with a maximum of 5 teams. Owners are precluded from selling more than 30% to institutional investors. Private equity investors can bring more franchise buyers into the game and higher team values for the owners. It can also provide some liquidity for team owners. But the traditional team ownership profile is changing somewhat quickly. What's your feeling on private equity money coming into the NBA?
I think the jury is out a little bit on this. So the issue that the private equity guys have is they're used to making investments where they're in control, first of all, and in this scenario, they're not. And two, even when they're not in control, when they're making a minority investment, there is a plan to get, to have a liquidity event 5, 7, 8 years in, something in that time frame where they kind of know that the asset's going to be resold at some point, and they're going to get their profit. Sports teams don't work like that. They tend to be held for a long time. And when you buy a minority piece, they're not so easy to sell because buyers want control, and you don't have control. And so there are a couple companies that have been making investments in teams, and I think it's going to be interesting to watch to see at what point in time they become frustrated that they're not able to generate a liquidity event, that they're not able to get out at the level they think they can, because the value is in the controlling interest. So if the controlling party is selling, they're going to do great because I'm sure they have tag along rights. But in an environment where the controlling interest is not selling, you're not going to get full value for a minority piece. It's because you don't have control. So I think this is a pretty new phenomenon in our business, and I think the next probably 10 to 15 years will be pretty interesting to watch how happy or unhappy some of those investors become.
Yeah, what's your take? I mean, if a private equity fund comes in and makes an investment, are they expecting access to, hey, what's going on internally? Or do you think they are just totally on the outside saying, hey, we're going to root for you and see what happens, a few to several years down the road? What do you think?
My guess that's on a case by case basis. I think there are certain franchises that may be so sexy that they would make the investment without much transparency. Others, they would want to have, a little bit more of a say, but I don't know. we haven't entertained that, so I don't have any experience with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what comes into play with that is, if you've got an Arctos or a Dial Partners that comes in and they invest in your franchise, and they take a look and see what your operations are like. I mean, obviously you've got, this is ultra competitive. You've got proprietary information.
Yep.
And now you might have somebody coming in and looking at your organization that's also invested in 4 other NBA teams, right? I mean, obviously people are not going to be comfortable because they might say, hey, the Heat or the Knicks are doing it this way. You guys aren't doing it that way. You need to change your operations here. And, there's a competitive advantage that's just, evaporated. So
Yep.
I don't know, but I would think teams would be pretty guarded against that.
I would agree, but again, I haven't had the experience and I don't know. I think the more, and I think that is an issue. I think the more interesting issue is the exit strategy. Like, how do you get out? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think who's ever investing in these funds has somewhat been guided that, hey, this is not going to be a typical, we're going to buy this, and if the markets are good 3 to 5 years, we're going to exit. I think they probably have been somewhat guided on this, that this is going to be longer term. But as you said, nobody could really project what the term of that investment will be.
Right. No, that's correct.
Yeah. All right. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Here's a good one for you. Los Angeles has come out with the wall seating, or I guess standing section this year in its new stadium, the Intuit Dome, which I guess is supposed to resemble more of a college-like environment where fans behind the basket can distract opposing players when shooting foul shots. I watched this on the internet, and it's definitely somewhat distracting for the players. I know that you guys have been cutting edge in terms of fan experience with the Heat. Are there any other possible stadium innovations in the pipeline to further improve home court advantage and/or the fan experience?
So we just this past summer, actually it's been a 2 summer project, invested a lot of money in our facility. We put in a new scoreboard, a new lighting system, a new sound system, a new seating system, all of which is designed to enhance the fan experience, and has created, we have theater lighting now, which is really cool. The sound system is almost perfect. In a facility that's 25 years old, it's almost like it's a brand new place. And we've got other things on the drawing board in terms of creating more premium spaces, building a new practice court for the players. There are things we're actively looking at and working on. And this ownership, the Arisons, have never been shy about investing in our facilities, and we've done something almost every summer since we've been open to change things up and provide a fresh experience for our fans, and we will continue to do that.
Yeah. No, I mean, you watch the games on TV. I mean, you can definitely feel very electric atmosphere, right? I mean, the Heat, and turn on the Knicks games. I mean, it's just looks like it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, tonight's it's an October game, and it's going to be a lot of fun. The Knicks fans I'm sure will show up, and we'll have a good one.
Yeah, Knicks Heat is always an amazing rivalry. I'm going to throw out one of my pet peeves to you, and I know it's a big part of your business plan, but you got to understand this coming from the perspective of a guy who spent a lot of time sitting on the bench in college.
Right.
I have a hard time getting used to the fact that the teams sit so far off the court, and you've got the fans in there, and I mean, it just amazes me to see coaches coaching, as guys are sitting there drinking beers, having food and stuff. But I realize that's big time premium seating, and I don't even know what those tickets sell for, but that's just amazing that the players get moved so far off. But I guess if everybody's making so much money, nobody's really got anything to complain about. So just kind of my pet peeve.
Those are the most valuable seats we have. So
enough said. Eric, let's talk work stoppages since everything's going so well. NBA hasn't had a work stoppage since 2011, and the current CBA, or collective bargaining agreement, is in place through 2030. Overall, there has been labor peace in all major sports in recent years. Do you think the numbers are just getting too big for either ownership or labor to walk away from the negotiating table these days?
Listen, I wouldn't sit here and say that that's not a factor, but I have a slightly different perspective, which is that first of all, it's all relative. You know, the dollars were big in 95 and in 2000 and in 2005 from the perspective of that time. So the dollars have always been big. Yeah, they've gotten bigger, but the whole world like has changed in that way. I think the bigger factor is that the unions, the players associations have become much more sophisticated and have hired executive directors and presidents and CEOs with real business backgrounds, not just necessarily a former player or someone that doesn't have experience who's kind of going by the seat of their pants. Like there's when those negotiations start now, both sides have a plan. The conversations are very transparent. I think in the old days that wasn't always the case. It was more about leverage and, you know, sticking out your chest, and those days are over. I think these are business partnerships, and the conversations and the agreements themselves are much more sophisticated and much deeper and much broader than they were in the past. And so, yeah, some of it is maybe about the money, but it's more about how we're making the money and working together to do that than it was in the past. And I think as a result, the relationship between the leagues and the unions, at least in our sport, has become a much more there's a much clearer recognition of the mutual benefit to getting something done in a timely manner.
Yeah, about 10 years ago, I was involved in with some guys. We were looking to put together some financial guarantees for players in Major League Baseball, and just given the compensation structure there was a pretty big opportunity, right? If you could give some players some financial security to wait for better contract offers, it would result in, you know, tens of $millions potentially in new money for them. And obviously the owners didn't like what we were doing, but the union did. And we spent some time with Tony Clark and his team. And I do remember when we first went in there, it was almost like Tony Clark and just a stable full of labor attorneys. And it was changing as kind of we were, you know, we were talking with them and they were bringing in some business people, but you could tell when we first got in, there was a little bit of a hole. So I think that's changed a lot. But I think the other thing that, this would just be an observation. I mean, my feeling from MLB was it was a really, really hard line between ownership and labor. I mean, it was tough. I mean, everything, you know, I could tell that nothing was done without calculating, okay, how are the owners going to respond to this? I almost get the feeling that there's been a better relationship between the union and NBA owners. Do you feel like there's a pretty good relationship there overall?
I do. That's what I'm trying to say. I think the relationship is good. And I think, listen, there's a recognition that we're 50-50 partners, you know, and I think that was a really smart thing to do between David and Adam and the heads of the union. You know, when you know you're at 50-50, you're really only talking about the other things, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
and that makes the conversation a lot easier.
Right, right. I get you. Let me throw out one quick one. You oversee all operations of the arena. Just curious on the concert business. How competitive is that business? I mean, you've got a beautiful arena. You're in Miami. Is it a natural stop for a big artist on tour to say, "Hey, we've got to get into Miami and do a show there"? I mean, I know there are competing venues around, but how competitive is that business these days?
The business is very competitive. The you know, one, we have a building 30 miles away that we compete with, and always have. A lot of the bigger artists are more and more playing stadiums, which I think, you know, as a consumer, as a fan, I think is a shame. But you know,
Yeah.
that's competition. And I think Florida itself, you know, Florida's a peninsula, right? So no act is going to just come to Miami. You're either going to play Florida or you're not. And if they do play Florida, you know, we've been super successful. We've been consistently been a top 10 building in the US and a top 20 building in the world, and that's for the last 15-18 years. So it is competitive. We've competed very successfully, in that market, and I think have built a reputation as a really artist-friendly place to play. Like, we take care of the artists when they're here. They can see South Beach from our back door. Clearly, that's an advantage. But the sound is great. We've invested in the facility, and the major artists want to play.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of concerts down there. That's a great venue for concerts.
Yes.
Eric, so appreciative. Thanks so much for your time today. It's been great catching up. We wish you and the Heat all the best this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. It was my pleasure.